Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome back to NPTEL, the National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning. This is an initiative by the Indian Institutes of Technology and the Indian Institute of Science. Our course, as you know, is entitled Cultural Studies, and we are at the moment in module 4, the last module of this series of lectures. The topic today is new media, a relatively new area or subfield in the study of cultural forms. And as you know, this module is entitled Culture Industries, and Cultural Forms, right? So as always, let us do a recap of what we did in the last lecture. The last lecture was devoted, as you know, to television as a cultural form, as a media form. And we saw that the study of television as a cultural form, by and large, entails 4 areas. Okay? Number 1, television is seen as, or television programs are seen as cultural texts that are encoded by the producers and are decoded by the audience, and additionally decoded by cultural studies scholars as to their formation of meaning. Then we also saw that television was seen as a resource for identity, and audience studies is an increasingly important part of studying television under cultural studies, and television is of course a popular or source of popular knowledge. We then also saw that apart from these, textual analysis, okay, of media texts, the political economy, especially from a Marxist approach, the patterns of meaning that emanate from television, and audience research, these are also areas of study that are increasingly being more and more important as far as media is concerned. We also saw that in the early phase, the study of television, particularly in the 1970s from a cultural studies perspective, entailed the study of ideology, hegemony, cultural power, mainly from a Marxist perspective, and also the routine attitudes and production processes, okay, and practices of staff in media houses. Then we found that in the late 1980s, there was what we call the active audience paradigm, where the audience was seen as active creators of meaning, and also the aspect of the fact that audiences could also resist ideology. This was also incorporated and accepted or acknowledged in media studies cultural studies of a media form like television. Finally, we saw that a global electronic culture is what characterizes the television industry today, and this is of course a part of the larger globalizing process, right? Fine. So let's then, after this brief recap, let's come to the topic at hand today, which is new media. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of new media or are aware of what new media is. What we shall do today is first, define what new media is, and or it should be new media are, right? What new media are, what these comprise, and then we are going to look at how cultural studies is going to look at new media. So the key source texts in today's lecture are The New Media Reader by Wardrip, Fruin and Montfort, an edited volume, and Bennett and Frau's another edited volume here, The Sage Handbook of Cultural Analysis. Of course, there are today, increasingly you find very good anthologies, very good collections of essays, and also single authored books on new media. But for the purposes of a lecture which is just short of an hour in duration, I thought we should look at only two such texts, so that our discussion is also a well-contained one. Fine. The first thing about new media is this. New media is to do with the digital medium and not the analog medium. This is extremely important, okay? One needs to keep this in mind, that new media is to do with digital, the digital form of, or as a medium. Now, I look at an important name here, Lev Manovich, The Language of New Media, and actually he's quoted in an essay in Bennett and Frau. Lev Manovich says that new media are the cultural objects which use digital computer technology for distribution and exhibition. This is important, and you shall understand why as we differentiate between new media and the old media, the traditional, not traditionally, the media before this. We shall understand why these two words, distribution and exhibition, have been highlighted here, okay? So, new media are cultural objects, cultural forms which use digital computer technology for distribution and exhibition. Now, what is the factor that is missing here, okay? The factor that is missing here is of storage, which means it doesn't mean that it is not stored, but that is not the onus here. If it is stored even in the digital medium, but not distributed, okay, and not exhibited, then we do not call it new media, okay. So, I hope this is clear to you right in the beginning, that distribution and exhibition of digital media, only when that is there do we call it or term it new media. Fine. Next, let's read from Wardrip, Fruin and Montfort's book, The New Media Reader. The digital medium which we see may seem plural to us now because it is so myriad in its forms, right? The term new media is a sign of our current confusion about where these efforts are leading and our breathlessness at the pace of change, okay? So, it is after Manovich we knew that new media has to be called new media, it has to be distributed and exhibited also, right, in digital form. Wardrip and Fruin also, says that this digital media is extremely plural, that is, its forms are extremely plural, its forms are myriad, right? And there is, almost a breathless pace of change, right? There is the change that is happening in this medium, so to speak, and the myriad forms that it sort of throws up, right, from time to time, perhaps is a change that has not been paralleled in the history of media forms and media industries. Then they go on to say, and I am quoting from them, how long will it take before we see the gift for what it is? A single new medium of representation, the digital medium, formed by the braided interplay of technical invention and cultural expression. Now, they say that, well, they ask, is there a hope, okay, one fine day, to see all these, and I'll be talking about these various forms, myriad forms in a while, is there a hope of these kind of collapsing into one brand new medium of representation? Okay, what they call the braided interplay of technical invention and cultural expression. So, the forms that comprise new media are many, and one of the most important points here is that, or characteristics these have to have, is that of interactive communication. Okay, so what are the forms that are in which we find new media express, or what are the forms that new media take? The forms may be the blogs that you read, the social networking sites like Facebook or Twitter, podcasts, RSS feeds, wikis, and hypertext. Okay, so your generation is of course deeply acquainted with all of these forms, and of course the important aspect that these fulfill in order to be at all called new media is that they are obviously distributed and exhibited, right? And there is an interactive communication. Look at all of these: blogs, podcasts, RSS feeds, hypertext, wikis, and social networks. These are exhibited, right, on the net or on the internet, and you access these from different different gadgets and different appliances, right? All of these are interactive in form, and all of these are in the digital medium, and they are exhibited, right? They are distributed and exhibited. So again, going back to Manovich, what do we have to reiterate here? That new media forms cannot just be stored in digital form, they also have to be exhibited, and they are also interactive communication devices. So therefore, what is not, let's ask this question, what is not included in new media? Okay, what is not included in new media are also media forms, but they are in this case older media forms like television programs, feature films, books, magazines, right? Here this is important. Here also you may use computing, right? You may use the digital format for these. For instance, television programs, books, you have books in digital formats, feature films, magazines, right? You could say that, well, these are also available to us in that medium, but the exception is this, that they are, you use computing for production and storage of these cultural media forms, television programs, feature films, books and magazines, but look at this slide here, not for final distribution. Okay, so as long as they are in the storage stage, right, and they are not distributed or exhibited, and you can't interact with them, then we do not call these new media. If you interact with a book at a hypertext level, that is where you can read a book online, and you can make your comments or give your annotations, etc., and where others can also communicate with you and make their comments on your comments or on the text, right? Then it no longer becomes the old media, right, or old medium. It then becomes part and parcel of the new media system. So therefore, interaction is again what you may call a sine qua non of this new media system. Okay. Then I would like to spend some time on an essay by Lev Manovich. Just before this, we had referred to a book by Lev Manovich, which is referred to in the New Media Reader, but we are now going to look at an essay by Lev Manovich in the edited volume New Media Reader. Now, he gives us 8 propositions, okay, as to as to how we can define new media, or what characteristics have to be there in media forms in order for those, okay, to be considered or called new media. So The first point that is made by Manovich is this, that we also, before we move on to talk about the characteristics of new media, first we shall have to distinguish or differentiate new media from cyberculture. Okay? So, new media versus cyberculture becomes really our takeoff point, okay, or becomes the point from which we begin to talk about new media. So, how do we distinguish between new media and cyberculture? Now, according to Manovich, cyberculture is social phenomena on the internet. Okay? New media is distinguished from cyberculture in that we define new media as cultural objects, right? So, you see here, these are cyberculture is social phenomena, right? Whereas new media are cultural objects and paradigms that are enabled by all forms of computing. So, whereas cyberculture then is a phenomenon, right? New media is a paradigm, and new media comprises various objects, okay, in all forms of computing. The next point, the point number 2 in the 8 characteristics that have been given to us by Manovich is this. Let's look at it carefully. New media as computer technology is used as a distribution platform. Of course, we've referred to this here, okay. New media as computer technology should be used as a distribution platform. That is, these cultural objects, these new media objects that we saw, like podcasts, like blogs, like social networking sites, etc. Okay, these have to be distributed and exhibited. That is, there has to be a distribution platform for these to be called new media forms. Point number 3, new media as digital software controlled, digital data controlled by software. Now, new media as digital data, right, has to be controlled by software, and the meaning is this, right. These new media forms have to be manipulated by software, okay, which leads to the automating of media operations. Why? So that there are multiple versions of an object. Now, let's look at this a bit more carefully, right. New media is as digital data has to be controlled by software, right. In the sense here, controlling means that it has to be malleable, manipulable by software, so that there is there's a possibility of multiple versions of the same object being created and stored and distributed. Okay, so we will not go so into so much detail, but I would like to still talk about dwell just a bit on the other the rest of the 8 characteristics. So, the fourth point or characteristic as given by Manovich is that new media is the mix between existing cultural conventions and the conventions of software. It is not something that is entirely new, and by this time we have, I'm sure, had an idea of this. Okay, so he calls it a mix between existing cultural conventions, that is, existing conventions and rules or existing methods, of kind of storing these cultural forms, and there is, added to these existing cultural forms, there is also the conventions of software. So, new media is really a mix between the previous methods and now with the coming in of software that can manipulate, okay, that can enable the formation of multiple versions of the same object, right. So, it is a mixture of the existing cultural conventions and methods and the conventions or the new methods brought in by software. Point number 5, new media is the aesthetics that accompanies the early stage of every new modern media and communication technology. Now, it is also, new media is not simply about software, about control and manipulation by software. It is also, that it's also an aesthetics, and in that sense, many may also say that new media, every time media change, right? Every time there is a new breakthrough, so to speak, or a new format or new methods that are used in media forms, right? New methodologies, then it is obviously accompanied by a new aesthetic ideal or new aesthetic standards and methods in communication technology. Point number 6, new media are faster, show faster execution of algorithms previously executed manually through other technologies. Okay, so speed is an important aspect of new media. Then new media as the encoding of modernist avant-garde, new media as metamedia. Now this is important. New media is the encoding of modernist avant-garde. Avant-garde is a term, well, not only in literature but also in other forms like art, for instance, in design, for instance. Okay, so we find that new forms, new modern or even postmodern forms, okay, which are sort of what we call cutting edge art forms. Okay, these new media also encode from time to time these avant-garde or cutting edge designs and technologies. Okay, and new media therefore is also metamedia. Meta is a word, a Greek word meaning beyond. For instance, metaphysics, when we say metaphysics in philosophy, it is meta is beyond, and physics, that is going beyond the physical or going beyond the domain of physics, right? So here also new media is not just a medium of its own. Not only does it have its own forms, media forms, cultural forms, but it is also metamedia. In this, metamedia would mean media thinking about media, media reflecting on media, and media changing media. Then new media can also be considered, according to Manovich, as a parallel articulation of similar ideas in post-Second World War art and modern computing. So parallelly, these aesthetic forms, these new media forms, okay, are parallel, okay, or have been parallel, so to speak, to developments in in modern computing, developments in modernist art forms, right? And so there are certain connections and parallels between these two domains, that is new media forms and art and modern computing, right? So among all these, I didn't go into these points 4 to 8 because it will need a lot of time, and then we may go away from our central focus here. But what did we find? Essentially, what was important for us is that new media should be distinguished from cyberculture, in the sense that cyberculture is a social our social phenomena on the internet. New media are objects and paradigms that are enabled by all kinds of computing. Then new media has to be a distribution and exhibition platform in order to be called new media. Then new media has to be something which is manipulable by software, okay, where there is an automating of media operations, and where multiple objects or versions of objects are enabled. Okay, there is an ability, okay, of the software to create newer versions or multiple versions of cultural objects. And then we saw, for instance, a mix between existing conventions and the conventions of software as an aesthetics that accompanies new communication technology, where there is speed, and where it's the encoding of modernist avant-garde art. It is metamedia, and it is the parallel articulation of ideas that are also there in modern art and modernist art and modern computing. Okay, so we now know what new media is. We now know the characteristics of new media, and now let's move on to the other points, right? Going back, now it doesn't mean that new media is something that we've just thought about just in this, in the 21st century, or that because the podcast is new or relatively new and the social networking sites are relatively new, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a history, right? So if you go through in detail the new media reader, that we referred to in the beginning of this lecture, you will find some very interesting essays. You'll find the delineation of the history of new media, and you will be about computing, about software, and there are names like, you are familiar with, for instance, Alan Turing, okay, and Vannevar Bush in the middle of the 20th century, okay. These were sort of the forefathers, right? These are the forefathers of because of whom such things like, or such cultural and media forms like new media are something that we could have even thought about, right? So Vannevar Bush, and this is something most of you know, which is he's envisaging a memex machine or memory, which can be unpacked into memory index, okay, where there would be a compression and storage of knowledge. If you read these works by Vannevar Bush, or works like in cybernetics like Norbert Wiener, for instance, okay, these are excellent reads in the sense that these are scientists, all right, these are technologists, all right, but one gets so pleasantly surprised and inspired even, okay, when one reads these works. Why? Because there is a vision in people like Vannevar Bush, or in people like Norbert Wiener, for instance, as to the betterment of knowledge, okay, to the betterment of to better ways of storing knowledge and of disseminating knowledge, and even the question of where the human race as far as technology is going. So Vannevar Bush is a name along with others that we should remember, and that these are the people because of which we today have such technologies, even though they are not immediately the creators of such technologies. So again, how is new media new? If anyone asks you what is the new in new media, then we will have to say very precisely that the techniques, as far as techniques of representation of data goes, right, as far as these techniques go, as far as the techniques of representation go, there is a shift from the analog, okay, to the digital. This is again the without which not of new media, and this is something you have to begin your answer with as you talk about new media. Then I refer to, remember I referred to Bennett and Frau's edited volume, or the Sage Dictionary of Cultural Analysis, a book that we had come across in other lectures in previous modules as well. And there is an essay by Terranova entitled Cyberculture and the New Media. You see, there is always an attempt, to differentiate between these two terms, new media, as you saw in our lecture also, in our discussion. There is an attempt to differentiate between cyberculture and new media, right? According to this author, new media is media that breaks away from mass media. This is immensely important, okay? New media breaks away from the older form of media, okay? So remember, we did the culture industry in the first lecture. A bit of it was also there in the lecture on the commodity, right? The new media has to break, is one, in order to be called new media, is one that has to break away from the older format of the mass media. Okay, now to unpack it a bit, mass media and new media may be differentiated also, not simply, okay, from the point of view of technological methodologies, which is something that we have been looking at all this while, but also now as we move into the cultural analysis of new media, then we make, there are a few articulations that people like Terranova in this essay are making. We can have these points of differentiation. Whereas mass media may be called a modern industry, right? New media is postmodern in nature, right? This is very important. Mass media is modern in the sense that, as we saw in the culture industry, the goods are standardized. There are certain homogeneity in these. There is predictability. There is also even as assembly line production. Okay, and the consumers are also at least seen to be homogeneous, right? That is, there is not much segmentation really in as far as the profiles of the consumers go, right? But in new media, we find that as a postmodern industry, both the goods that are produced and the audiences that are targeted, or the consumers who are targeted, are highly segmented. Okay, this is very important. So whereas, as we see, what did we see here? Whereas in mass media, there is a standardization of goods and cultural products and objects. There is also at least the assumption, okay, that there is a certain degree of sameness or homogeneity in the consumers who are partaking of this. In the new media market, right, the goods are highly variegated and the consumers are, already the assumption is that the consumers are very heterogeneous. Okay, so it's a highly postmodern, or it's a postmodern industry in the sense of this lack of sameness or lack of heterogeneity. And of course, this point that Manovich had also made, a great deal of speed. That is a great deal of speed, not only in the transfer of data, but also in the way these forms keep changing, okay, which has led, I think, one of the critics to say that new media is media that is forever new, that is forever changing itself. Okay, it's one way of interpreting the new media. That is, new media forms are forever in very high speed, right? In a very frequent manner, okay, producing newer and newer forms, right? So this is one way also of looking at new media, particularly from not just a technological methodology perspective, but also from the perspective of cultural studies. That is the main point being here in differentiating these two as respectively modern and postmodern industries. Therefore, we may also call this, okay, on this kind of shift as a shift from a mass media to a multimedia. This is very important, okay. Mass media products, once these are assembled, once these are produced, and once these are distributed, they are not changed or they are not changeable. Why? Because they are not software determined. This is important, okay. Again, going back to Manovich and his characteristics, these are not manipulable by software, okay. Whereas in, excuse me, whereas in as far as the new media is concerned, we may also use the term multimedia for it. So multimedia conventions, software conventions, okay, allow changes, right, and that is allow a number of versions of any object to be stored and distributed, okay. So new media is also then characterized by change. Now, reading from the text, the study of new media is open to research that investigates them as sites, this is important, as sites of new cultural and political potentials. This, in fact, as I said, more than the technological detail is what is important for us. New media platforms, okay, are they have a lot of potential, okay, as lot of cultural and political potential, in the sense that because these are really new in a sense, okay, they are really new and they are manipulable and they are changing. It is not that it just gives the researcher, a very rich, very new and very rich domain, to conduct research in cultural studies, but also that, these are sites for new cultural and political happenings, okay, so that we have to understand them anew, right, as and to look at them as places or locations where where new cultural practices are being developed, where new political strategies are being developed, even willy-nilly. So the question, reading on, the question of media and communication is key to social transformation in contemporary culture. The position of new media in this respect is strategic. They involve the problem of the strategic role played by communication in the reproduction of democratic societies and cultures. Okay, despite the digital divide, okay, despite the fact that there is enormous inequality in the very accessibility of the digital medium and its products, okay, there is also, and many would say even paradoxically, there is also the great political potential. That is why they have used the word new cultural and political potentials. Okay, so there is great potential of a new sort of democracy democracy evolving, and in fact it has evolved. Many have kind of welcomed this new media and its forms as highly egalitarian, right? So the position of new media in this respect is strategic because they involve the problem of the strategic role played by communication in the reproduction of democratic societies and cultures, in as much as they are also new technologies. The study of new media also refers to the problems opened up by sociological analysis of the role played by information and communication technologies within capitalist economies. Okay, so therein again you find the paradox, right? You will always have proponents from both sides of the debate. Okay, proponents who say that, well, you see, there is a whole global electronic culture to which you can have access from any corner of the world, okay, and therefore despite your class, caste, gender status, you have this beautiful distribution and exhibition system, okay, which is there at the tip of your finger, at the click of a mouse. On the other hand, what the new media has done or have done, new media forms have added or made more complex, if not complicated, the hitherto existent sociological analysis, okay, of the role played by technology in a capitalist economy. Okay, so those on the other side of the fence, okay, who see the digital divide as one of the stark realities of our time, okay, who see this as yet another form of late capitalism. See, remember, this is also a postmodern industry. Okay, so postmodernism is related to late capitalism. Okay, so it is not that one should adopt a celebratory mode, and now that there is we have access to knowledge, and knowledge has been the internet is a door to all knowledge forms, etc., and mankind today has sort of won this battle against the poverty of knowledge and the poverty, at least, of the access to knowledge. It is not so, and we, as Terranova has shown us in her words, these are some of the things that we have to be careful about. Next, I will end with another idea here in the cultural analysis of new media, New media can also be seen as a new form of expression in the public sphere. Now, the philosopher Habermas, Jürgen Habermas, is the one, the person who's coined the term public sphere, at least as a concept or conceptual tool or terminology in philosophy and in critical theory and even in sociology, right? So, we then find that this new media is yet another addition to the public sphere, and well, does it also then, as we talk about democracy, about politics, also in the public sphere, does it then also further complicate and make complex the idea of public sphere and as given by Habermas. Okay? So, the new media is then seen as having greater potential for a cyber democracy or genuine public opinion where the subject is not preformed but is able to fashion himself or herself. Okay? So, one of the points that we may, without really going deep into the debate of the proponents, the adherents, the proponents, and on the other hand the detractors of new media, one thing is of course sure, okay, the subject here, as he or she engages with new media and these new kinds of intercommunicative or interactive communication platforms, okay, compared to the older mass media forms, the subject and his or her subjectivity is not given, is not a given, okay, it is not considered preformed, okay, it is, as one uses new media forms, it is going through continual change, and maybe that is one of the ways in pointing to the liberating aspects of new media. Okay, here the subject is not preformed and is free to fashion himself or herself without having any fixed identity. Okay, so this also is postmodernist modernist way of looking at new media, at subjectivity, as fashioning in a new way. Probably Foucault today would have also pointed to a different sort of or different method or methodology of self fashioning, right, if he were to talk about new media. So, in that sense, okay, new media, the fashioning of oneself or one's own subjectivity, and also liberating oneself from the very traditional traditional categories of caste, of gender, of class, etc. These are forms from which new media may allow you to liberate yourself. Okay, so there is, as is mentioned here, this is a new expression in the public sphere, and sociological and cultural analysis will have to then rethink their parameters, even maybe rethink some of their concepts as they allow this this new medium, so to speak, to be a important contemporary part or important part of contemporary public sphere. Mark Poster, okay, is one such proponent, and I am reading a sentence from him as is quoted by Terranova in Terranova's essay. The magic of the internet is that it is a technology that puts cultural acts, symbolizations in all forms in the hands of all participants. Okay, so we, as I said, the main point to understand, to remember, is new media will always have its proponents and its detractors. Okay, it is not just the liberating aspects or this new addition to the public sphere that we need to look at. We also need to look at how there are new regimes of work, right, and there are new modes of production. Definitely, it is new media also belongs or is a part of the political economy, okay, and as a part, or at least temporarily, from the point of view of time, being a part of late capitalist economies with a postmodern sensibility. Okay, there are new modes of production processes that go into these, which need to be looked at even from a Marxist point of view, from a political economy point of view. What are the new forms, okay, of exploitation of labor, right, that come in, that surface in when you talk about the people, the staff who are engaged, okay, who are behind the scenes in this new media, and what are the new regimes of work, right? Does it mean, when you talk about, for instance, if you say that, well, these are of course very liberating, one can have access, the older routines of work are no longer there. You may be sitting in a beach somewhere and you may be sending in your work. Now these kind of very simple statements are, statements that are highly problematic, right? In that sense, your work also then, does it continue into your leisure, so-called leisure hours, right? So if your leisure hours were well defined before, right, and you had your work time, your leisure time, your family time, in this case, as you have, a new media which is available from innumerable destinations, then what are the new regimes of work? Now look at the word regime. Okay, it is in that sense still a regime. It is still regulated. It is the means of surveillance in this case will be different, but there is also the danger that in the new modes of production, okay, in the political economy of new media and the new regimes of work, we may only see exploitation taking newer forms. Okay, so ending with just two more slides, Pierre Levy, another critic, calls this a new humanism, right? And when we'll be looking at cyberculture, okay, we'll be talking about post-humanism. So it is a new humanism where there is both a growth in self-knowledge and collective thought, and both one feeds into the other. From collective thought, the availability of the thought processes and the products of thought, of thinking, of so many people, more than ever when there was a time of the printing press, right? Here the accessibility is 1,000-fold more than before. So there is a growth of collective thought, which in turn gives, gives an exponential push to self-knowledge, and self-knowledge, on the other hand, the growth of self-knowledge also feeds back into collective thought. So there is a new humanism, and which is also related to interactive communication, to digital platforms, to machines. These are things that we shall be discussing in our next lecture, and ending with what one critic says. This is a move from Descartes or the Cartesian "I think, therefore I am" to a very promising, okay, a very promising "we think, therefore I am," or we think also, both "we think, therefore I am" and "we think, therefore we are," right? So I think the individual subject now is no longer the isolated individual subject, okay? Thinking now is spread over the digital worlds, exhibited in different digital platforms, okay, which leads to this new slogan, "We think, therefore I am," and "We think, therefore we are." That is both, what Levy calls self-knowledge and, the collective thought that feed into one another. So I hope, I've been able to shed some light, of course, as always, through some of the practitioners and critics of new media studies. And this is, of course, being at the level of, BTech classes. This is just an elementary look into new media. Those of you who are in the research levels and are watching this video, of course, would find, hopefully would find in some of the deliberations here ways of, ways of research. For instance, somebody in philosophy may think of working on subjectivity in new media. Okay, somebody from sociology and cultural studies may think about the political economy of new media. Now, it is not to say that work has not been done, but a lot of work remains to be done in various the aesthetics of new media, for instance. So these are some of the areas which students at the postgraduate levels, at the PhD levels may take up, okay, as research topics. So let's now move on to the discussion and quickly a few questions. If you get a question like define new media, you now are aware of the different ways in which you can define new media. You first say that the new media is first defined as a digital medium, okay, as compared to the medium here is not an analog one. Then you can refer to Lev Manovich and his 8 characteristics. If you get a question with 5 to 8 marks or 10 marks even, you may refer to the 8 characteristics. And one of the first things that you need to tell here is that new media are cultural objects. Okay, this is most important. Cultural objects, cultural forms, interactive communication, cultural forms, okay, which use digital computer technology for not just for storage but for distribution and exhibition. Okay, so what are the forms of new media? Some of the forms of interactive communication and new media, and we have to remember that there are many more coming. Okay, forms which you have never even thought about, right? Forms, and as technologists probably you can think of how to contribute to newer forms, newer, more useful, okay, that's more important, more useful forms, socially useful forms of new media. Anyhow, the new media forms may be podcasts, blogs, social networks, RSS feeds, hypertext, wikis, etc. So what are the characteristics of new media? The characteristics of new media again would be part of the first question, that is define new media. Okay, the characteristics are maybe based on 8 propositions given to us by Lev Manovich, and we begin by talking about the difference between cyberculture and new media, where we say that cyberculture is a social phenomenon, whereas new media are actually objects and paradigms which are enabled importantly by all forms of computing. Then we also will say, of course, the distribution and exhibition are 2 important aspects that have to be there for something to be called new media, and then also that new media is controlled by software. Okay, this is very important. New media forms have to be controlled by software, have to be able to produce newer versions, many versions, multiple versions, so that we may call this journey from the old media to new media a journey from mass media to multimedia. Okay, and these are of course the rest of the characteristics, okay, which deal with the aesthetics, which deal with the speed, okay, which deal with the mixing of conventions of modernist avant-garde, and something that runs parallel to other similar ideas in art and modern computing. So I hope this has been useful for you, and as I said, there are so many books. You only need to go to the internet, okay, and to look at all these cultural studies practitioners and those of you who are into such studies in computer science, electronics, etc., would find this aspect, okay, this perspective very interesting. And it is, I believe, I'm not saying this only just because I'm from the Humanities and Social Sciences. Any good computer scientist will also consider these aspects, right? It only enriches your knowledge, even enriches, I would say, perhaps your technological knowledge. Go back to people like Alan Turing, for instance, to Vannevar Bush, to Norbert or Wiener, right? These are the people who not only read such perspectives, but also gave such perspectives from the human sciences to computers, to technology, to the new technologies that were developing at their time. Okay, so in the next lecture, we shall be looking at cyberculture. In this lecture, we have already made a distinction between cyberculture and the new media, and I shall meet you in the next lecture. Thank you. you.